Hey there, my friend. If you have been taking notes for months, maybe even years, I'm sure they looked organized, they make sense when you open them, they are clean, structured, thoughtful. But if you are honest, they don't feel connected, do they? They sit next to each other, but they don't really interact. And the longer this goes on, the quieter the doubt becomes. Why my notes don't spark new ideas? You see other people talk about interconnected knowledge. You hear phrases like ideas talking to each other. But when you look at your notes, your world, it feels like collection, not a conversation. And here's the part that's frustrating. You have tried adding links, but it didn't fix the feeling. So something deeper must be going on. Let's talk about it. Individually, your notes are fine. You open one note and it makes sense. It explains an idea clearly. It captures what you understood. Nothing is wrong with it. But when you zoom out, nothing connects. There is no tension between ideas, no sense that one idea change another. No moment where you open a note and think, oh yeah, this explains that. They live in the same space but they don't influence each other. It's like having books on same shelf that they never reference one another. They are related by topic, not by interaction, and that's where the quiet dissatisfaction starts. Because you don't start taking notes to build a library, you start taking notes to build understanding. So naturally, you try to fix it. You think maybe I just need to link more. So you start adding more links. You connect similar topics. You link shared keyword. You build backlink between related ideas. And for a moment, it feels productive. The notes look richer. The blue lines multiply. The structure looks intelligent. But inside, nothing really change. The ideas still don't affect each other. They are just connected by association. Friends, you can add links all day long and still feel intellectually alone because the world looks connected but your thinking doesn't feel connected, and that's the part no one really explain. And after a while the question turns inward. You start to think maybe I'm not thinking deeply enough. Maybe I don't understand the system properly. Maybe I'm missing some advanced method. You see people talk about networks of thoughts, emergent structure, and second brain, and you wonder why doesn't mine feel like that? You follow the advice, you took the notes, you added the links, so why does it still feel flat? The doubt is subtle. You don't say it out loud, but it sit in your mind, quietly suggesting that maybe you are just not doing it right. So here is the real question. Why don't notes connect naturally? Not manually, not because you force them, but naturally. Why do some system feels like a web of thinking while other feels like filling cabinet? Is it a technique problem, a tool problem, a linking strategy problem, or is something else happening underneath? What if the issue isn't how many links you add, but whether the ideas were ever interacting to begin with? That's the real question we need to answer. Most beginners carry an assumption without realizing it. If I link my notes, they will become connected. It sounds reasonable. If website link to each other, they form a network. If document link to each other, they form a structure. So if notes link to each other, they should form understanding. But that assumption hides something important. A link is structural, connection is conceptual. Those are not the same thing. You can build structure without building integration. You can add links without deepening understanding. And if we don't separate those two ideas clearly, we end up optimizing wrong thing. The problem is not that you are not linking enough. The problem is believing that linking creates connection in the first place. Manually linking feels productive for a reason. You are doing something visible, you see the links appear, you see the structure grow, you see the network expand. There is movement here, and movement feels like progress. When you connect two nodes, it looks like you creating depth. The graph view becomes denser, the page looks more sophisticated. It gives the impression of integration. But here is the subtle part. Linking change layout. It doesn't automatically change the meaning. You can connect two nodes because they share a topic, but shared topic is not the same as shared thinking. It's possible to connect ideas that never actually influence each other. And when that happens, the system grows, but your understanding doesn't. That's why it feels productive in the first place and empty later. So, what is the real connection then? It's not two notes mentioning the same word, it's not two ideas living in the same folder, it's not even two concepts being about the same topic. A real connection happens when one idea change how you see another, when one idea explain another, when one idea challenge another, when one idea depends on another to make sense. That's integration, not urgency, not similarity, but integration. Two ideas are connected when they affect each other. If removing one would weaken the other, that's a connection. If adding one deepen the meaning of another, that's connection. If one idea answer a question raised by another, that's a question. And none of that happened just because you type double bracket in your Obsidian. Well, here is where most system quietly breaks. Most beginner notes are summaries. They capture what the source said, they explain the concept clearly, they stand on their own, and that sounds like a good thing, but self-contained ideas don't need each other. If a note fully explains itself, it doesn't rely on another note, it doesn't argue with another note, it doesn't depend on another note, it just exists. And when ideas only exist independently, they don't interact. They sit next to each other like separate article in magazine related by topic, but not by tension. Connection require comparison, connection require friction, connection require incompleteness. If your notes don't talk to each other, it's because they are not answering each other, and summaries are rarely asked questions. They just conclude. So here is the change. You don't need more links, you need more interaction. Not structural interaction, but intellectual interaction. Links are not cause of connection, they are evidence of it. If the interaction never happened in your thinking, adding links afterward is just cosmetic. It's like drawing arrows between boxes that never actually influence each other. Connection start in the moment when two ideas meet in your mind. The link in your note is just a trace of that meeting. If the meeting never happened, there is nothing real to link it. That's the change, and once you seize that clearly, the entire problem look different. So if links don't create connection and summaries don't naturally produce interaction, then what actually does? Let me ask you something. What makes ideas influence each other instead of just coexist? What creates the feeling of a web not because you engineered it but because it emerged? To answer that, we have to zoom in on something deeper. Friends, connection is not a structural event, it's a thinking event. And once you understand what that thinking looks like, the rest become obvious. Let's look at this next. Alright, let's reset what we mean by connection. Connection is not about density, it's not about how many arrows pointing where, it's not about how impressive your graph view looks. Connection happen when one idea change another. When encountering idea A makes you interpret idea B. When learning something new reshapes something old. That the shift, that internal adjustment is connection. It's not visible, it's cognitive. Two nodes can sit next to each other forever and never connect. But the moment once reframe the other, you don't need to force a link, you feel it. Connection is influence. If one idea doesn't affect another, there is nothing meaningful between them. And that influence always happen in your mind first, later it later appear in your notes. So now what does influence actually look like? Friends, there are few simple ways ideas interact. First, explanation. One idea explain why another works. For example, if you learn about selective reaction, later you understand structural memory and suddenly you realize structural memory explain why reactivation works. That's connection. Not because they share a topic, but because one clarifies the other. Second, tension. One idea challenge something you previously believed. You read about maintenance thinking and it contradicts how you have been approaching review. Now those two ideas are in tension. That tension is connection. Third, dependency. One idea relies on another to make sense. You can't fully understand connections in notes without first understanding interaction between ideas. If removing one weaken the other, they are connected. So connection isn't about familiarity, it's about interaction, explanation, tension, dependency. When ideas begin to do one of those things to each other, they stop being isolated, they start to form a system, and that system begin in your thinking first and later in your software. Alright, let's make this simple. Imagine once you wrote a note about a reading feels productive because it created familiarity. At that time, it stood alone. Then later you write another note about memory get strength through retrieval, not exposure. And something happened. You realize the second idea explains why the first one fails. Familiarity doesn't equal recall. Now those two ideas are no longer separate, they are interacting. The second reshape how you see the first. That moment you feel, that's connection. Not because you link them, but because one idea answer a question raised by other. Or imagine this, you have a note about maintenance thinking. Later you write about selective reaction and suddenly you see reactivation removes the pressure that maintenance create. Now they are not just related topic, they are part of the same argument. That's connection. It's not about similarity, it's about idea affecting each other, and when that happen, linking feel obvious because you are not creating connection, you are acknowledging it. In a few minutes, I'm also going to show you exact real example of this in my Obsidian. But before that, let's see why this kind of connection doesn't happen naturally. See, most of the time when we write a note, we are focused on capturing the idea. We only ask, did I understand this correctly? Did I summarize it clearly? Did I record it accurately? And once that done, we move on. There is no pause, no comparison, no friction, but connection require comparison. It require you to hold two ideas in your mind at the same time and ask, how do these related? Do they agree? Do they conflict? Does one explain the other? If that comparison never happen, interaction never happen. And if interaction never happen, there is nothing real to link. Ideas don't connect just because they live in the same world. They connect when they rub against each other, and that rubbing, that friction is thinking act, not a linking act. Think about the last time something truly clicked for you. You were not organizing, you were not linking, you were not managing structure, you were thinking. You encountered a new idea, and instead of just writing it down, it reminded you of something else, or it contradicted something, or it filled a gap in something. For a few seconds, your mind held both notes at the same time. You compared them. You adjusted one in the light of other, and then it happened. That quiet shift, that small internal, oh, that's connection. Not the link you added afterward. Not the arrow in the graph view, but that moment. The link in your notes is just a trace of that click. If the click never happened, the link is empty. If the click does happen, the link feel obvious because the connection already exists in your understanding, and that's the difference between a system that's look connected and a mind that's connected. So now the next question comes, if connection require that internal comparison, why does it rarely happen? Why do so many node system feels organized but not integrated? It's not because you are incapable of deep thinking. It's not because you need a more advanced workflow. It's because most note writing habit never create that condition for that click. We capture, we summarize, we store. But we rarely compare, and without comparison, interaction never begins. So let's look at why most notes never reach this level. See, most notes are written to contain information. You open a book, you watch a lecture, you learn something new, and your goal is simple. Capture it clearly, explain it in your own words, make it make sense. There is nothing wrong with that. I have taught some of the thing, but notice notice the goal here. It's containment, not interaction. You are asking, did I understand this idea? Not how does this idea relate to something I already know. So the note becomes complete, self-contained, and closed. And a closed idea doesn't need another idea. It doesn't depend on another idea. It doesn't challenge another idea. It just sit there, well written but isolated. If most of your notes are written to contain information rather than compare it, then connection never even gets a chance to begin. A self-contained note is satisfying. It explains the concept clearly. It stands on its own. If someone read that note, they would understand the idea. They would feel the success. But here is the quiet consequences. But here is the quiet consequences. If a note fully explains itself, it doesn't need another idea. It doesn't raise a question that another question can answer. It doesn't depend on missing piece. It doesn't leave tension unresolved. And connection requires unresolved tension. It requires incompleteness. Two ideas only interact when one idea needs the others, when one clarifies something left open by another, when one challenges something assumed by another. But a perfect sealed note has nothing to argue with, nothing to question, nothing to build on. So it just exists. And when most of your notes are self-contained like that, they don't connect. Not because you failed to link them, but because they don't need each other. What you gonna link? Friends, connection doesn't begin with structure, it begins with reflection. When you encounter a new idea, there is a brief window where something important can happen. You can either capture it and move on, or pause and ask yourself, how does this relate to what I already know? Most of the time, we don't pause. We summarize, we polish the explanation, we close the note, and we move forward. But without reflection, there is no friction, and without friction, ideas never push against each other. They never compete, they never clarify, they never evolve. If you never hold two ideas side by side and compare them, they never get the chance to interact. And if they never interact, they never connect. So the issue isn't that you didn't add links, it's that the comparison never happened. If the comparison never happened, adding links afterwards doesn't fix it. You can open two notes and think this seems related. You can connect them because they share a theme, but if they never challenge each other, never explain on each other, never depended on each other, the link is decorative, it's just a cosmetic. It gives the appearance of connection, but the idea remain unchanged. You can't force interaction, you can't force tension after the thinking moment has passed. Structure can reflect integration, but it can't manufacture it. And that's why so many system looks connected but don't feel connected, because linking is linking is downstream, interaction is upstream, and if the upstream thinking never happen, no amount of downstream will create it. So here is the root cause. Notes don't connect naturally because the interaction never happened in your thinking. Because in the moment of writing, the ideas never met. They were captured but not compared, preserved but not challenged, understood individually but never placed in conversation. Connection isn't missing from your software, it's missing from the moment of reflection. And once you seize that clearly, the problem stop being structural, it's become behavioral, which is a good thing because behavior can be changed. So if connection doesn't begin with linking and it doesn't begin with structure, where does it begin? It begins in a very small moment, right after you understand a new idea, before you close a note, before you move on, there is a pause available there. And in that pause, one simple question can change everything. It's not a system, it's not a workflow, just a shift in attention. If you ask the right question at the right moment of writing, interaction start naturally. And when interaction start naturally, connection follows. Let me show you what this question look like. Before we go any further, I want to remove some pressure from your chest. You don't need to go back and relink your entire vault. You don't need to redesign your structure. You don't need to turn every node into interconnected web overnight. Connection doesn't get fixed in bulk, it gets built forward. You don't need to repair isolation by editing the past, you change it in the present moment of writing. So this isn't about cleaning up your system, it's about adjusting one small behavior the next time you write a note. That's it. Once you finish understanding a new idea, before you close your note, ask one question: where I have seen this before? That's it. Not as a checklist, not as a ritual, just as a reflex, where I have encountered something similar. Does this contradict something I already believe? What does this idea depend on to make sense? You are not searching your world, you are scanning your understanding. If something come to mind, pause there. That's the bridge. That's where interaction begin. Connection start the moment you compare, and if nothing come to mind, that's fine. Then there is nothing to connect yet. The goal isn't to manufacture a link, it's to notice interaction. In other words, I don't create links, I discover them. This works because brain connect ideas through comparison, not through storage. When you pause and ask where I have seen this before, you force your mind to retrieve something, and retrieval activates existing ideas. Now two ideas are present at the same time. That's the condition connection needs. If you never retrieve anything, the new idea stay isolated. It's get stored, but it doesn't interact. The bridge question creates friction. It pulls something old into the room with something new, and when those two ideas sit side by side, one of three things happen. They agree, they conflict, or one explain the other. Any of those creates interaction, and interaction is what later become a link. The link is just documentation, the comparison is the real work. Alright, now let me show you what this look like in practice. Let's say I'm writing a note about selective reaction. The idea is simple. Selective reaction means I don't review all notes. I revisit ideas when context makes them relevant again. Okay, that captured the idea. Before I close the note, I ask myself where I have seen this before. Where I have seen this before? Oh yeah, I was learning about maintenance thinking last week and I have a note about it. That older note argue that learning isn't about preserving everything constantly. Now I see it clearly. Let's create a link. This reduces the pressure created by double square bracket. Now I can link that note maintenance thinking. Those two ideas interacted. One resolved the tension created by other, so I link them. Not because I'm trying to build density, but because I notice the interaction. Now something else happening. I think I'm remembering another idea, another note. It's about structural memory. That note explain the ideas that stick when they are used in context, not just reviewed repeatedly. So now I realized something. Structural memory explain why selective reaction works. So now we have three nodes connected by topic, connected by interaction. Maintenance thinkings create pressure. Selective reaction respond to that pressure. Structural memory explain why that response work. That's a triangle not engineered but discovered. And the links are just trace of that discovery. Now if you go back to the backlink section, of any of these two nodes, you see connections that are not related by topic, they are related by arguments. Friends, let me clear about something here. This isn't about linking every node, it's not about scanning your vault for possible connections, it's not about increasing backlinks count, and it's definitely not about forcing relevancy where there is not any relevancy. If nothing comes to your mind when you ask the bridge question, that's not a failure. It just means the idea hasn't interconnected with anything yet. Maybe you learn in the future something, and then this note you created will interact with this future note. Friends, connections can't be manufactured, it can only be recognized. When I link selective reaction to maintenance thinking and structural memory, I wasn't trying to make my world denser. I noticed they were answering each other. That's why I link them. That's the difference. A few meaningful links that reflect real interaction are far more powerful than dozens of links that build on similarity. In other words, depth beat density every time. If your notes don't feel connected yet, it doesn't mean you are behind. It doesn't mean your system failed you. It doesn't mean you are bad at note taking. It means your ideas are still developing. Connection happen at the speed of understanding, not the speed of linking. So ideas take times before they mate. Some concepts need experience before they interact, and that's normal. You don't need to build integration by force, you build it by thinking. So if your world feels quiet right now, there is not a problem. It's just a stage. As your thinking get deep, interaction increase, and when interaction increase, connection become obvious, not engineered but obvious. So now the problem looks different. It's not how do I connect my notes better, it's how do I make my ideas interact more deeply. Once you seize that shift, linking stop being the focus, thinking becomes the focus. And when thinking change, structure follows naturally. So now what you can do next is check out the description. There are few videos that you must watch next to make real concrete what you learn here. Videos like what you should write inside a note. Well, that's all I wanted to say for this video. Hope I see you in this next video. See you there.